Today I'm reviewing The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain, published by the Folio Society in 2012. It's a fairly standard presentation as far as Folio Society editions go, and so first of all we receive this plain black slipcase. It's covered in black paper, it has a white paper lining. It's not super substantial, but it's perfectly serviceable for the purposes of protecting this book. Inside is the edition itself. It is fully bound in a grey linen-like cloth. It feels like it's going to be pretty hard wearing. And then the front board has been printed with an illustration of what looks like a slightly dishevelled woman caught in some car headlights. And that's a scene that will have some significance once the story gets underway. On the spine we have the title, The Postman Always Rings Twice. We have the author's name, and then here we have this small vignette illustration of a male and female figure stood by an open window. The rear of the book is unadorned, it's just that plain grey cloth. So here we can see the volume in its entirety. It's a modestly sized book and is also reasonably slim. And then here we see that we have black end bands and the three edges of the text block, as usual, are trimmed. If we open the book, we have grey end papers rounding out what you might call the exterior presentation. I think the book gels together in terms of its exterior design quite nicely, but there's nothing especially fancy about it. The text block is composed of Abbey wove paper, just like almost all modern Folio Society editions. So this is not an especially luxurious paper, but it's perfectly serviceable and certainly better than you'll find in most trade editions. And then here we see the title page, and in addition to the title and author, we see that we're going to have an introduction by Steve Erickson and illustrations by Patrick Leger. And the first of those illustrations is here by way of the frontispiece, and that gives a bit of a preview of the graphic style that we're going to see throughout. So next I'll leaf through the book and we'll take a look at some of those illustrations. There are 7 of them in total, which feels like a fairly generous offering for this book that is barely more than 130 pages long. And they have this very graphic style, which is reminiscent of mid-century posters, which might have been used to advertise a hard-boiled movie based on this book at the time. The images are chosen to illustrate key plot points from the story, which is another thing I like. It's very recognisable what's going on there. I suppose the one complaint I would have is not about the illustrations themselves, which I think are perfectly fine, but rather about the fact that they've been spaced a little awkwardly throughout the book. Some of the images appear long after the events they've described, and at that point the plot has since moved on. Other illustrations, on the other hand, appear before the events they depict, and then they serve as a sort of spoiler. So I would have preferred slightly smarter placing for the illustrations. Here we could take a look at the list of those illustrations. As I said, there are 7 in total. And over on the verso side, we have the copyright page, which as usual contains some production details. And so we see that this is going to be typeset in a face called Fotina. For those who care about such things, this was printed and bound in England. So the introduction was quite enjoyable. Just like the book, it has a hard-boiled style, so it fits thematically into the edition quite neatly, I thought, and as I said, was relatively entertaining. As for the book itself, it's a short story, 119 pages, and it has this hard-boiled style for which James M. Cain could be regarded as one of the pioneers, and moves at quite a brisk pace. So it was a very entertaining, light read. The characters are difficult to like in many occasions, but nevertheless quite compelling. And the book itself is full of drama, which helps to keep everything moving along at a brisk pace. So that's pretty much all there is to say about The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain in its 2012 Folio Society edition. It's a fun story. I enjoyed reading it a lot, and there's a lot of nice touches in this. I like the illustrations. The introduction was very well executed. The edition itself is pretty standard. Nevertheless, perhaps the best way to experience this classic of hard-boiled fiction by James M. Cain.